with me today. I might have worn the same shirt last week. I don't know. I was trying to remember. I try to wear a different one every week so that when you look back on the videos, you can figure out, this one's different from that one. Anyway, this might be the same shirt. So we're continuing on in our study in Luke and talking about the ministry of Jesus as he went around teaching. We were in chapter 10 last week, and we're going to be in chapter 15 this week. So between 10 and 15, there's a lot of material, which I won't even attempt to cover all of it. I'm just going to hit a couple of high points. But, Jesus was teaching as he went around. And one place that I wanted to touch on was where he said, because this is a meaningful verse to me, in Luke chapter 11. So let's just touch on that one. Verse 24 and through 26 right there. Jesus said, when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through waterless places seeking rest, and not finding any, it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds it swept and put in order. Then it goes and takes along 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they go in and live there. And the last state of that man becomes worse than the first. And the reason that this verse is meaningful to me is because I had the chance to share this with a man who came and told James, our son, and I one day, he said, I've ruined my life with alcohol, and I'm going into rehab to try to get clean. And he said, I've lost my business, I've lost my family, everything because of alcohol. And I was able to share with him this verse, and I said, if you go into rehab and you get clean, but you don't replace that alcohol with something else, meaning getting to know Jesus and what he teaches and following him. If you don't replace that, then you're going to turn right back around, and it's going to be even worse than it was before. And so it's important when that goes away that something replaces it, and that's true for all of us. And with any thing that we decide to lay down, and God helps us to lay it down, then we need to pick up and put Jesus in the place of that, or else we're just going to go right back to the way things were. So that's a meaningful verse. As Jesus was talking and teaching as he went along, he talked about how this generation is going to have the sign of Nineveh, of Jonah, where Jonah was in the belly of the whale or the fish for 3 days. And, he alluded to some of those things as he went through. And then he really got on the case of the Pharisees and others, the lawyers. He said, you put burdens on men that you're not even willing to help with, and you're not even willing to lift a finger to help, basically. And so he got onto them, and then at the beginning of chapter 12, it says something there that I'd never noticed before, but it says, so many thousands of people had gathered together that they were stepping on one another. So there were this many thousands of people now that were gathered and following Jesus to hear what he was saying and to see what he was doing with the miracles and things like that they were actually stepping on each other to try to get a look and to try to get closer. And I had never noticed that verse before, but that's in chapter 12, verse 1. And so he goes on, talking about being ready for Christ to return, and I know a lot of these things they maybe didn't understand because he hadn't gone anywhere yet. The crucifixion had not happened yet. And so, but later then they reflected back and they could understand these verses as we understand them today. And then there were parables also mixed in with this, where he was teaching people by way of parables. So we get over to chapter 15. And in chapter 15, there are 3 stories, or parables, I guess you could say. And so he was teaching really the same message with all 3 of these, talking about the lost sheep, the lost coin, and then really the lost son, which is what we're going to talk about today. In the lost sheep, he's talking about if a man had 100 sheep and he lost one, he would leave the 99 and he would go and find the one, and he would rejoice because he had found the lost sheep. With the lost coin, the lady has 10 silver coins and loses one, so it's similar to the other. And then she finally finds it, and she calls together her neighbors and says, "Let's rejoice because I found my lost coin." And so then we get to the story of the prodigal son, and that's where we're going to focus today for a few minutes. The lesson book skips right over the first part of the story, but I'm going to go through and just tell that story. So I'm going to sort of tell it down to 20, and then we'll read the verses. So a man had 2 sons, and the younger son said, "Father, give me my inheritance. I want what belongs to me." And so the father did that. He divided the wealth and gave some, half to the younger son and half to the older son. And the younger son took his and went away to a far country, it says, and he just wasted all of it on, a party lifestyle or riotous living or whatever you want to call it. He squandered his estate, it says in my Bible, with loose living. And he had spent everything, wasted all of it. And then a famine came in the place where he was, and he had no food. And so he hired himself to one of the citizens of that country to feed their pigs. And in that moment then, when he was there in the pig pen or whatever, feeding the pigs with these, pods from a tree or something like that, he said to himself, I feel like eating these pods. I mean, really, he was so hungry. And he came to his senses, the Bible says. And so when he came to his senses, he said to himself, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, and I am dying here with hunger. I will get up and go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. So it took every bit of the inheritance that he had inherited to be wasted. And, the attitude with which he had asked for that. Because if you think about it, what he was really saying is, give me what I would get when you die. And it was almost like, I don't care if you're still alive or not. I want what's coming to me. It was a very selfish attitude, and I'm sure it hurt his father very much for him to do that. And then he went and wasted all of it. And to the point that he had nothing and no one. And then he came to his senses. And sometimes it takes that with a person. They just can't make a change until they reach the rock bottom, and we've heard that before. They have to get to the bottom of the barrel and have nothing, have everything taken away before they can say, okay, I'm going to change my attitude. I've done wrong, and I'm going to go forward in a different way. And so that is what happened with this young man. And so we're going to start now in verse 20. And so we're in chapter 15 of Luke, verse 20, and that's where we're going to start from with reading verse by verse. So I'm going to read 20 and 21. So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So he had practiced this of what he was going to say to his father, and that's what he said, when he saw him. I think a couple of interesting things about this is that while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. So you have the idea that the father was watching maybe every day, looking to see if he would return, because if you're a parent, you know that as that young man left, his father knew in his heart of hearts what he was going to do with that fortune that he had given him, that he was going to waste every bit of it, because he probably already knew the lifestyle that he was choosing to live and the things that he was interested in and his attitude and all those things. His father knew those things. And he knew that he would go and he would waste all of it. And probably every day after he left, his father watched and hoped that he would return and come back to his senses and come back to his father. And so, if you can imagine and put yourself in that father's place, he looked and then he saw the son coming, and he ran to him, it says, and embraced him, kissed him, and then the son gives his little, speech. I've sinned against heaven, and in your sight, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. So he was repentant at this point. He realized that not only had he sinned against his father, he had sinned against heaven as well in his attitude and the things that he had done. And he said, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Okay, so let's see what the father's response is. And this is a very familiar story to us. But there are things here that, come across in a different way at different times when you hear it. Okay, so in verse 22 to 24, the father responds, But the father said to his slaves, Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fattened calf, kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. So the father is just rejoicing that this son has come back. And he brings out clean clothes for him. I'm sure he probably took a bath, if he had been feeding the pigs. Clean clothes, a ring on his finger, some shoes on his feet, and then bring the fattened calf. And so the fattened calf, would have been one that they had held separately from the others and didn't let it trek long distances out into the pastures and things. Maybe they had fed it by hand and were keeping it and fattening it up with special food so that it would be just right for a special banquet feast or something that they were, that they had coming up. And so the father then says, bring that fattened calf and kill it, and we're going to celebrate because this son of mine was dead and he is alive again, has come to life again. And so for him, when that son went away, it was like a death, I guess, and an end to something. And so to see him come back, he's overjoyed and begins to celebrate and have the servants to get things ready for the big celebration. Now we get to verses 25 to 27, and the older brother comes into play. So this is, step by step, we're seeing all the characters in this story. Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." So, if the father divided all of his fortune or his estate between the two boys, then what was left is the father living with the older son on his part of the estate. And so really everything there, belongs to the older son at this point. When the father passes away, it will definitely, all be his. But in those cultures, and I guess in our culture too, but in the Middle Eastern culture, the parents have a lot more control over the family, and the children have to a lot of times let the elders take the lead, until they pass on, and the children are the elders. And really, we should pay more attention to that in some of the ways that we treat the elderly in our culture nowadays. I don't know that we necessarily all raise our children or grandchildren to respect their elders in the way that we should, and so, but in this case, this older son was respecting his father, and the father still had some control over the household, obviously, and telling people what to do and bring the fatted calf and all of that. And so, when the brother then comes from the field, he's been working. He's been out working. He gets close to the house, and there's a party going on. Music and dancing. And he calls the servant. What's going on? Maybe he thought that a big visitor had come, from elsewhere, or something. And I can imagine that he's dirty. He's been working in the fields. He doesn't want to just come in the house and till he knows who's in there, and maybe he has time to get ready before. And so then the servant comes and says, "Well, it's your brother. Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." So, this is what he found out when he got close to the house. So then in verses 28 to 30, we see his response to this. "But he became angry and was not willing to go in. And his father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his father, 'Look, for so many years I have been serving you, and I have never neglected a command of yours. And yet you have never given me a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.'" So, the fattened calf, we could probably do a whole hour on the fattened calf, but the fattened calf was important. In other words, this was for a special thing that they were getting this calf ready for. And this is just such an insult then to the son. He feels so insulted because he has worked, he has done everything the daddy told him to do. Like I said, in that Middle Eastern culture, daddy would have still been bossing him around and been in charge, of the household or whatever. And so He's done everything that his father asked him to do. He's been an obedient son. He's worked hard on the farm. He's out in the fields. He's not sitting in the house sending someone else to do the work. He was out in the field working. And, you know, you can sympathize with his response. You know, this boy has gone and wasted all of that money that you gave him, and now he's come back and you're treating him like royalty. You know, you've killed the fatted calf. You've given him clothes and a ring and shoes and all this, and so you can imagine why he didn't want to go in the house. He was just mad about it. And I human nature, I mean, I would have been mad about that too, probably. You know, I think most of us would have been. You know, he did not rejoice that his brother had come back and was alive. Because of the way that he had been treated and was being treated, you know, as he had come back. And so the father then responds to him in these last two verses. And he said to him, "Son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has been found." So, you know, the father tries to make it right with him and to help him understand that, hey, I'm not about to take another half of all that we have and give it to him again. You know, that's not what's happening. Everything I have is yours now. You are the heir of everything. But he refers to him as this brother of yours. You know, just before the brother had referred to him as this son of yours. You know, so he's reminding him that this is your brother. He was dead to us, and now he's alive again. He was lost, and now he's been found. And so there was a reason to celebrate, you know, and he toned it down a little bit for him. Now, you know, there's so many applications of this story, because Jesus wasn't just telling a story about a father and two sons, really, was he? He was telling a story in parable form to give an example of how God, I guess you might say, interacts with men. Because let's look at the older brother first, the one who had stayed obedient to the father and was working to help the father on the farm and all of that. You know, God, some people maybe become a Christian and they remain obedient to God. They do everything they can to please God, or they try their best, you know. They don't go out and have a wild life and then come back to God. You know, they just never do that. They just start out on a good path, and they kind of continue on that path in their life, in the way that they live out their life. And then there are others who may go out and, like this son, I think of God in the same way as this father, of feeling sad when he sees one of his children going away from him. And not only going away from him, but going away from him with an attitude of rebellion, and taking everything and going and just wasting their life. You can imagine how sad he must be, because he knows that's not the life that he would have chosen for them to live. But yet, he does let them do that if they've got their minds set on doing it. Then he lets them do it, because he knows, you know, he can't. I mean, he could stop. Yes, he could stop them, but at that point, you know, it takes the free will out of it, doesn't it? And so God allows us to have the freedom to do some really stupid things and disobedient things. That's not what He wants for us. What He wants for us is for us to come to Him and be obedient and, do the things that He says for us to do. And so He rejoices. And there's other places in the Bible where it says that angels in heaven rejoice over one sinner that repents. In this case, you see the picture of God rejoicing over this prodigal son, this wayward son, who then turns around and comes back to the Father and knows that he's done wrong and repents of it and comes back to Him and has been lost and now has been found. And so, this is a picture of someone who has lived their life and made many wrong choices, and yet they turn and they come to the Father. And for us as Christians, we have to be very careful that we don't become like the older brother in the sense of becoming angry or not accepting that person. When someone comes into the church that has lived a horrible lifestyle and they're wanting to repent and be saved and join our fellowship, then we may have to fight against some of those same feelings to say, well, you don't deserve full membership yet. We're not going to treat you like we treat everybody else because you were so wayward, and we're going to keep you at a distance for a while. It would be human nature for us to feel that way, but that's not really what we should do, is it? We should be ready to forgive the lifestyle that someone might have led if they are truly repenting. And we try to protect ourselves until we know if they truly are repenting, I guess. But at the same time, we have to check our own attitude and be sure that we are accepting those who are willing to come to their senses and come to Jesus. And so, this is all three of these parables here in this chapter 15 are all talking about the rejoicing of the Father, or the rejoicing when the lost thing or the lost person has been found. And I think it puts the emphasis on that. And Jesus was saying how much the Father rejoices when someone turns and comes back to Him. And we should live our lives in a way that we try to help people make that turn, and come to the Father. So that's what I have for today. It's a very familiar story, but one that we should reflect on and think about our part in it. Where do we stand as one of the characters in this story? And, what is our attitude? Thank you for being with me, and I'll see you next time.